Welcome, everyone, to our deliberative forum on free expression at Davidson, to our friends online and to all of our friends here in person. It's great to see you all on this beautiful day in April. My name is Graham Bullock, and I'm an associate professor of political science here at Davidson College. I'm also the faculty director of the Deliberative Citizenship Initiative, or DCI for short. And I want to thank my co-host tonight, who helped organize this event, Melissa Gonzalez, Dan Lehman, Chloe Poston, and Ike Bailey, who we've been meeting over the last month or so for organizing this event. So thank you all, and it's just a great opportunity to talk about a really important topic. This is our 19th deliberative forum overall and our 9th in person. And sadly, but also happily, our last forum in this room, in this space for probably 2 years, because the library is getting renovated, very exciting. And they're going to be in this room as their space is getting a complete makeover. So we'll be doing some more creative things next year. And so please watch out for those opportunities. And I'll say a little more at the end about that. But thank you all for being here. And what I want to start with is just to ask you all to complete a little short pre-event survey that Carissa is going to post in the chat, and it is available on your tables. There's a QR code, the green side, the pre-event survey. You can take your phone and scan that QR code. And so a couple quick questions. It's part of our research component of the DCI, and it really helps us improve and understand what we're doing with our programs. And we'll do a similar one at the end. So today our topic is free expression at Davidson, rights and responsibilities during an uncertain time. And this is something that Ike and Melissa and several of us have been talking about doing for several months, even years. But we weren't immediately planning to do it now. We usually don't try to do these kind of events in April. It's a hard time for everyone at the end of the semester. But given the sort of, kind of things that are happening nationally and also here at Davidson, we thought it would be an appropriate time to talk about this really important topic. And it's like all of our topics, a set of questions that well-meaning and well-informed people can disagree on, and maybe perhaps disagree on very deeply. And what the DCI tries to do is create spaces for listening and sharing, and perhaps even coming up with new ideas that none of us had when we entered the room this evening. And so to help us with that process, we have a fantastic lineup of speakers and an opportunity for all of you to talk with one another. Tonight's event, as you all know, is free of charge, but the one thing we do ask is that you stay for the full 2 hours of the program, the speakers and the deliberative conversations afterwards, because in a lot of ways, those conversations are the purpose of tonight's discussion, tonight's event, and the purpose of the DCI. And we really want to foster these kind of productive conversations. We have about 15 trained DCI fellows and who are trained in how to facilitate these kind of conversations. If you could all, those of you who are here in the room, if you could all wave your hands in the air. And then online also you can wave too, if people can see you. But these are all to your fellow online participants. I think we have over 60 people in Zoom right now. So thank you all for being here as well. And they're going to be guiding you through a conversation, building on the deliberation guide that we shared earlier. And we have copies on all of the tables in front of you. And Carissa is going to copy a link to our web page that has the PDF version at the bottom of that page. So if you want to check it out, if you can't find it in your emails, there it is. And this guide was kind of a synthesis of previous guides that we've written on similar topics. And then also several of our students Stephen Walker and May Corley, who are two of our senior fellows and student co-conveners, they helped, sort of revise it and update it for this event. So thank you both to Stephen and May for that work. And I also, while I'm doing thank yous, thank Carissa behind the scenes for doing this work, and Lauren also Colmer behind the the sound. And Lauren, it's kind of cool. She's a former DCI fellow, and it's great that she's here with us tonight as well, helping make sure these mics work. And so a quick note on format. So those of you who are old DCI hands, this is a little different, right? We don't have a table up here. We don't have a panel. We thought that we would try something different to have a kind of series of remarks by our speakers who have a range of different backgrounds and perspectives on this topic, and to ask each of them to kind of share their views on our topic for tonight. We thought about having a panel and more structured kind of approach, maybe asking each panelist or each speaker to take one particular aspect of it and hit it in a very structured way. But we thought it might be more appropriate to design it in a way that we have kind of free expression about free expression. And so they're each going to share their own views. They have 6 minutes, and I'm going to be pretty strict about the times. They've got a little timer here so that we have equal time for everyone, and also time enough for you all to talk among yourselves as well. And because why is that? Because for us, for the DCI in particular, we see free expression as a necessary condition for robust democracies and healthy institutions of higher learning, but not sufficient. What is sufficient, what is needed, is not just people freely making speeches in the public square, but also respectfully engaging with each other around round tables, around public tables, so to speak. We need deliberative citizens deliberating freely, respectfully, authentically, and constructively. And so that is why we've paired our great lineup of speakers with an opportunity for you all to talk among yourselves as well. So with that, I'm going to introduce our speakers, and I'm going to be pretty brief, go one at a time. We're starting with Professor Melissa Gonzalez, who serves as an associate professor of Hispanic Studies and is core faculty in Gender and Sexuality Studies and Latin American Studies. She also served as Davidson's interim Chief Equity and Inclusion Officer during the 2023-24 academic year, and as the Acting Assistant Dean of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion the previous year. Her research spans trans and queer studies of 20th century and contemporary Latin American and US Latinx literature and culture. Dr. Gonzalez received her PhD in Latin American and Iberian cultures and her BA in English from Columbia University. Please welcome Professor Gonzalez to the stage.
Okay. Oh, wait. Yes, it is working. Okay, 6 minutes. All right. 6 minutes is really hard. It's harder than 15. It's harder than 25. It's harder than 30. We've all agreed. Okay. So several of us who are speaking, we're also part of the planning committee. And we did a lot of incredible work in a very short period of time. And we need to also, one person else needs to be thanked, who is Aaliyah Banks. I'm not sure if she's in the room, but she did a lot of, nice to see you, did a lot of incredible work along with Graham and all the people Graham mentioned to really make this happen in a relatively timely fashion, because things are happening really fast in 2025. So the first thing we're going to talk about in these 5 minutes are, one, the nature and importance of freedom of expression. Like, why do we value it in a democratic society and in higher education? I'm going to talk about why I value it, and I value freedom of expression as a voter, as a professor, as a mother, as a community builder. And I value, we were thinking of like a TED Talk situation, but I think it's a little difficult. And then some of us were like, no, we need a podium for our notes. So this we're experimenting. And the reason that I value freedom of expression is because one of my core values is respecting the bodily and intellectual autonomy of all other people. And that is aspirational, because while it may sound like, oh, that sounds reasonable, of course, humans want to respect the intellectual and bodily autonomy of all other people. It might sound like a universal human value, but it's very difficult, if not impossible. It is impossible in our current world to practice that without conflict. So I'll give you an example. Imagine a world in which everybody's bodily and intellectual autonomy is 100% respected. Imagine a world in which, what does that mean? Nobody feels entitled to tell other people what they should do with their own bodies. Nobody feels entitled, nobody of any generation, to tell a child who is reluctant that they should hug an older family member, right? Imagine a world in which all lives matter and all deaths are equally grievable. It might sound like, well, yeah, but that's something we all want, but that is very far from our world. And I'll give you some examples. So our statement of purpose, which is a document that I turn to many times, right? Davidson's statement of purpose is a document that I pull up constantly to center myself, to remind myself what our values are. And, you know, one of our values is respecting the dignity and worth of every person, right? And unfortunately, the more you study and learn about the world, the more you see how very far we are from living that value, right? Because not all lives are equally grievable, right? And you can see this when news programs report death tolls and talk about civilians versus soldiers, people of this nationality versus another nationality, right? So we don't live in a world where all lives value equally. We just don't. The reason that I think freedom of expression is so crucial is because we need it in order to co-create a better world, in order to think, analyze, and imagine our way out of the injustices of our current world. Now, the human condition is complicated because we're all individuals, but we're also all interconnected, right? Both and. And if you can imagine a world in which somebody, a human being, has a strong emotional response to the words of another person, but imagine if that person's emotions were immediately experienced, processed, and released without the person whose feelings were hurt by the words of another person either censoring their own speech or trying to censor the speech of the other person, right? This is anti-human. That's not how humans work, right? When humans come together, we are going to be affecting each other, impacting each other, hurting each other, right? So we cannot speak without affecting others. And feelings are not facts. That's one of my favorite lines. Feelings are not facts, but feelings absolutely impact and shape how we perceive and understand facts and information, right? I wish I could give you some citations, but there is an abundance of research in multiple disciplines attesting to this fact. So in this moment, right, it's become a bit harder to talk to each other and about the world, right? We're on a college campus community. There are phrases, like an example that has been in the news a lot lately is the phrase like, from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. Some of us hear that and hear a call for the right of an oppressed peoples, of a colonized people, to determine themselves, to have sovereignty. Other people hear that and hear something that is anti-Semitic, right? People hear lots of other things, but those are like the two big things that people hear. We're on a college campus. We're learning about the world. We're learning about how unequal and unjust and how complicated human communication is. So what happens when we hurt each other? I actually don't think that So I'm like, I still have a few minutes. No, I don't have any time. Let me wrap up really quickly. Um, so some of the questions are like, how does and should the college respond to concerns about the expression of particular viewpoints on campus, right? The thing is, thank you. How should we respond? Well, we have a responsibility as a campus community to like help each other when we hurt each other's feelings, when we miscommunicate intentionally or unintentionally, which happens all the time, right? And so I understand that the student code of conduct and responsibility is the primary tool that we have as a college campus to do this, to help when we hurt each other, when we affect each other in ways that might induce self-censorship or intentions to censor others. But a lot of something, and this is something that exists across college campuses, right? There's a student code of conduct, and students often don't fully understand it until they've been involved in a process with it, right? At this campus and at other campuses, there has been a move in student life towards a less punitive carceral legal framework. The language in student code of conduct stuff tends to borrow a lot from the legal system, right? There have been a lot of attempts to focus more on restorative processes, accountability, and repair to help students rebuild their relationship and understand each other in new ways. Instead of thinking about the limits that governing bodies can institute, I think it's more important to think about how we hold ourselves accountable as a community and what guidelines we set up as a community for how we will treat each other and be accountable to each other and repair harm when we hurt each other. And that is a direction that student life is already going on this campus and other campuses. And that's what I'm most excited about for the future of these conflicts between code of responsibility and freedom of expression. Thank you.
Thank you, Melissa. And sorry. So each of our speakers tonight could speak for an hour and fascinate all of us. And so I feel so bad having to, keep it going, but we do want to, sort of, again, save time for you guys to chat. So I want to welcome up Dr. Dan Lehman to be our second speaker. Dr. Lehman is an associate professor of philosophy at Davidson, where he leads our politics, philosophy, and economics program and teaches courses in applied ethics, early modern European philosophy, problems of philosophy, philosophy of law, and others. His research explores the character of political liberty with a particular focus on the works of John Locke. He is a co-convener of the DCI and has moderated several of our forums in the past. He received his PhD from UNC Chapel Hill and his undergraduate degree from Ohio University. Please welcome Professor Dan Lehman. Yeah, sure. Yeah, just try to make sure you're close enough to it.
Is this one working? I don't, yeah.
Yeah, it is, yeah.
Might be a bit better. Yeah, there we go. Okay, well, as the philosopher on the panel, I'm going to abstract a bit and consider some fundamental moral questions about free speech and its value. And my aim today is to defend what we can call the classical liberal position on campus speech. This position holds that colleges and universities, including staff, faculty, and students, as well as administrators, should never block, censure, or discourage the expression of any moral, political, scientific, or theological idea. Restrictions on the place, time, and manner of expression may be permissible, but even these may not rest on the grounds that the expression of a particular idea in a particular place, at a particular time, or in a particular manner is likely to be especially offensive. For example, on this view, it's okay to forbid shouting anything in a dorm at 1 a.m., but it isn't okay to forbid the distribution of, say, pro-Palestinian handbills in a dorm on the grounds that dorms should be an ideological safe haven. In a moment, I'll defend the classical liberal position on grounds borrowed, with some liberties and additions, from the tradition of John Stuart Mill. But first, I want to reject two ideas that are, despite their close association with this tradition, in my judgment, indefensible. First, classical liberal defenders of free speech sometimes insist that while speech may offend, it can never harm. I believe this is wrong. There is no reason to think that speech cannot harm, and much reason to think that it can. The social worlds through which we relate to one another are, to a greater extent than we sometimes realize, made with words. It is through language that we create and affirm social and political status for one another, and it is with words that we have so often wreaked reckless havoc on one another. Insofar as we rightly praise Dr. King for sharing his dream in 1963, we should grant that Richard Spencer did harm when 50 years later he wrote in Vice that, quote, "Our dream is an ethno-state for all Europeans." Second, classical liberal defenders of free speech frequently contend that in a free market of ideas, the truth will always, or at least nearly always, win. I see no reason to accept this. False ideas have won and will no doubt continue to win contests of ideas. Like any market, the marketplace of ideas responds to demand, and it's a regrettable fact that we do not always demand the truth. Committing to the classical liberal position means accepting that true ideas will be permitted to lose. Why then should we accept the classical liberal position on campus free speech? There are, I think, two main reasons, among others. The first turns on self-governance. In a democratic society, we, the people, must decide how to live together under conditions that are at once cooperative and competitive. There is no one else on earth to whom we can or should appeal to decide for us. Moreover, in a democratic society, we must co-author these decisions as equals. No one has any clout above and beyond the reasons they offer to others. If we give anyone standing to end an exchange of reasons by fiat with a "because I said so," rather than with a reason of their own, we abdicate our democratic office. Moreover, when we allow anyone this kind of standing within a college or university, we undercut one of the primary functions of a college education, which is training citizens for the work of citizenship. As President Eisenhower said at William and Mary in 1953, the true purpose of education is to prepare young men and women for effective citizenship in a free form of government. This is one of the principal reasons we expect the public at large to support higher education with their trust and their money. To the extent that we abandon this purpose, we abandon much of our claim to their support. The second and related reason to accept the classical liberal position on campus free speech turns on respect. On the face of it, this might seem like a stretch. Why should anyone respect speech that is false, illiberal, or worse? I agree that no one should do that, but that's not the kind of respect I have in mind. To see what I do have in mind, it will be useful to consider a distinction between two kinds of respect that was introduced more than 40 years ago by the philosopher Stephen Darwall. On the one hand, there is appraisal respect. This is the kind of respect one earns by performing excellently in some domain. For example, Steph Curry merits appraisal respect as a basketball player, whereas I, who can barely make a layup on the very best days, just don't. On the other hand, there's recognition respect. We owe recognition respect to others not in virtue of their achievements, but rather in virtue of their status. Even if a speaker in a democratic setting, such as a college, merits no appraisal respect, she merits recognition respect as an equal source of reasons and a participant in the democratic project. Accepting the classical liberal position I'm asking you to consider is hard. Accepting it means accepting that speech can and will do harm, and that bad ideas will sometimes win. But to the extent that we embrace this position, we have a real shot at governing ourselves, and at college, learning to govern ourselves as a free community of equals. And that's a great good, I think, that's well worth it. Thanks.
Thanks, Dan. And came in just right on time, so appreciate that. All right, our next speaker is Governor Jim Martin from the class of 1956. Jim Martin served as the Republican governor of North Carolina from 1985 to 1993, represented North Carolina's 9th district as a member of Congress for 6 terms from 1973 to 1985, and served on the Mecklenburg County Board of Commissioners from 1966 to 1971. Before his political career, he was a chemistry professor right here at Davidson College, and more recently served as a member of the group, together with Professor Ike Bailey, that drafted Davidson's statement on free expression. Governor Martin is also a board member of the organization Davidsonians for Freedom of Thought and Discourse. Please welcome Jim Martin.
7 minutes, Stanley.
All right, that's good.
Oh, thank you. My pronouns are y'all and y'alls. And the nice thing about free speech is we don't get paid for it. So first, do we value freedom of expression? Of course, yes, truly so. 7 years ago, this small group of alumni, Davidsonians for Freedom of Thought and Discourse, DFTD, petitioned the college to protect freedom of expression. They were disregarded, marginalized, you might say, because no one in power thought there was any need for it. My friend Ike Bailey encouraged President Quillen to appoint 6 of us to draft just such a statement. And with him as the chair, we included every element of the so-called Chicago principles, every last one. After President Hicks arrived, the draft was open for serious deliberation, and in 2023, only 5 years later, it was affirmed by a nearly unanimous vote of faculty and trustees. There's a lot of credit to go around. Some still pretend there never was a problem, but some concerned students discovered an ally who would listen. That's how we alums became Davidson's ombudsman, unofficial and somewhat unwelcome. We learned that dozens of classes offered identical syllabi, copycats, to compel allegiance to something not relevant to the subject, DEI. Students were told to acknowledge their sin as oppressors of vulnerable minorities, confess, repent, atone. And so the once idealistic acronym DEI became the old Latin plural noun for gods, Dei. We reported these abuses to the administration, but sought no censure of any professors. Maybe they just thought they were simply doing what was expected, virtue signaling. But it was more like dogma-driven inquisition, and it had to cease. And then there was an issue of 500 athletes being told they had to go and watch a documentary, a controversial one, that said that if you're white, you're racist. That's a racist definition of racism. But after months of poor communication between us and the administration, all doctrinaire syllabi quietly disappeared. Students are still free to watch movies if they like, but no longer compelled to do so unless it's part of your coursework. See, that's progress. There was a problem. It got fixed. What's next? A good step would be to emphasize Davidson's commitment to freedom of expression in freshman orientation. It's at least as vital as telling vulnerable minorities they're just victims. Now, second, should there be reasonable limits on free speech? Of course, if I get to decide what's unreasonable. See that fellow behind that tree? Go silence him, don't silence me. And remember, hate speech does have this value. Nobody forgets who said it. Davidson recently applied what I would say is an arguably unreasonable limit on free speech. We've got this software that helps you tattle on one another. It's called College Reporting System by Maxient. Some justify it to help another student get medical or spiritual or psychiatric attention, like a good Samaritan without getting too involved. But then a few weeks ago, a Davidson student got reported for distributing pamphlets supporting Israel and sports between women and women. and this ought to be at least as protected under freedom of expression as the parallel right to advocate for Palestinians or feminine boxers with XY chromosomes. Imagine letting this outrage foster and fester. Pretty soon, activists on both sides will be out there rushing to cancel each other first, the Marxian way. I must accuse you before you accuse me. And if it only takes one accuser to cancel me, then pretty soon we're all canceled. This is Orwellian reprogramming, and it's got to stop. Stop the squeal, as the president might say. Third, how should the college respond to concerns about expression of particular viewpoints on campus? Let freedom ring, not rulemaking. Here are two policy recommendations instead. For the short term, Davidson should affirm a policy of institutional neutrality. This means the college doesn't take public sides on partisan controversies. When the college declares what is the proper and acceptable view on a hot political issue, it squelches dissenting views among vulnerable faculty and students. And in that lofty spirit of intellectual neutrality, immediately after the Hamas raid on Israel, President Hicks said that Davidson would not choose sides in this ancient clash of civilizations, but would welcome and host respectful presentations from both sides, and did. That's leadership. Are there exceptions? Of course. Every time government arbitrarily steps on academic freedom. Yesterday, 170 presidents of top American colleges and universities co-signed a statement of united resistance to current intrusions. And yes, President Hicks was among them. Acknowledging this need for government oversight and constructive reform, and I hear I'm down to 1 minute. That 7th minute is so valuable. But acknowledging commitment to such government oversight and constructive reform, they're resolute in upholding against political control from the left or right. Institutional neutrality on politics does not require silence when your institution is being politically neutered. Long term, without regard for external disruptors, Davidson needs an active, affirmative commitment to recruit learned faculty with academic diversity. Fields of study with competing interpretation of themes thrive on diversity of relevant professional and ideological views. And until this is done, conservative students will never feel included in a partisan sanctuary. Some say conservative principles are adequately taught by liberal scholars, like identity studies taught by straight, old, white, conservative Republican men like me. This needs trustees' commitment, and until then, welcome, but don't test DEI allegiance, because that eliminates conservatives. To say that you can't be concerned about diversity that divides or the equality of outcomes. You can't stay quiet. Listen, discovery is always worse than disclosure. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Governor Martin. So next up is Professor Ike Bailey, who is professor of the practice in communication studies here at Davidson College and teaches courses on debate and deliberation, the ignored and forgotten, media, empathy and justice, reporting politics and elections, and more. He is an award-winning journalist and has published in the New York Times, Washington Post, Charlotte Observer, Political Magazine, and Time Magazine, and has appeared on NPR, CNN, and MSNBC. Ike was a Nieman Fellow at Harvard University and received his BA from Davidson in psychology in 1995, as we were talking about right before, ancient times, right? More recently, Professor Bailey served on the group along with Governor Martin, that drafted the statement on freedom of expression that I mentioned previously. Please welcome Professor Ike Bailey to the stage.
Hello. I'm at least like this numbered, like for me, is really about free expression. 8 billion. 8 billion. 8 billion. Let me say it one more time before I tell you why. 8 billion. Yes, like, and because sort of, like you are 1 in 8 billion. That's what you are. That's who you are. Literally 1 in 8 billion. Which means that your voice is literally 1 in 8 billion. Think of that for a second. The importance, the miracle of your voice. It's only one like it in 8 billion. Free expression to me is first understanding that fact, acknowledging that fact, valuing that fact, which means only you, in terms of that, like actually can use your voice. No other person on the planet can use your voice. Not your mama, not your daddy, not your cousin, not your uncle. Only you. That's how important your voice is. When it comes to free expression, that is at the heart of it. The value of each and every person's voice. 8 billion is more important than the First Amendment. $8 billion is more important than the First Amendment. Because if you don't use your voice, guess what? The world over misses something extremely important that only you can provide. Not your pastor, not your professor. Only you. And yet for a lot of people, we shrink and we cower. Every single time that something gets a little tough or challenging, we forget that we are literally 1 in 8 billion. Every time things get a little offensive, right? Somebody disagrees passionately with you and scares you, then we forget the 1 in 8 billion. I passionately and disagree with Governor Martin on almost everything that he just said about DEI and everything else. Passionately disagree with him on those statements. But guess what? I don't fear his voice or anybody else's voice because I know I am 1 in 8 billion. I am not afraid of any institution too cowardly to stand up for the First Amendment because I know I am 1 in 8 billion. Because I know if I don't use my voice, the world itself misses something extremely important that only I can provide. So here is the question for you. What exactly should your 1 in 8 billion be providing that you are not, for whatever reason it is that you have chosen not to? Fear, I might be judged by my friends, my colleagues might not like me. Some powerful person might disagree with me. What is your 1 in 8 billion not doing that it is supposed to be doing? What is your 1 in 8 billion not reaching? Who is your 1 in 8 billion not reaching that it is supposed to be reaching, but instead it is cowering in a corner? $1 in 8 billion. That's a miracle. You are a miracle. Your voice is a miracle. And yet you are sitting around wondering, oh my God, this person over here ain't gonna like me too much, so I better not use my 1 in 8 billion. My friend is not gonna like me tomorrow. My professor might disagree. So I ask you finally again, your 1 in 8 billion, what is it not doing that it is supposed to be doing?
Thank you, Ike. I'm so impressed. He actually got the idea of the TED Talk. So, thank you. But we're doing it all our own way, right? Free expression. So now we've got our next speaker, who is Jackie Pfeffer Merrill, who is the director of the Campus Free Expression Project at the Council of Independent Colleges. Previously, she was affiliated with maybe I'll use this instead. Or Lauren, is this better? Okay. She's previously affiliated with the Bipartisan Policy Center, and she's really a national leader in developing frameworks to support academic freedom and free expression on college campuses. Earlier in her career, she served on the faculties of the College of William and Mary and St. John's College in Maryland. She recently co-led a great workshop at Campus Compact with Daryl Lowe, Associate Vice President for Student Affairs at Spelman College, on approaches for building student civil discourse skills while fostering norms of free expression and academic freedom for staff and faculty from colleges and universities from across the country. Please welcome Jackie to the stage.
Well, thanks to everyone. We shouldn't talk about campus free expression without being attentive to where the speech and expression is taking place. On college campuses, there are at least 4 distinct zones where speech and expression takes place, each essential to the academic and civic mission, and with different rules, rights, and responsibilities with regard to expression. 3 of them are places where speech is rather constrained, and 1 is a place where I think speech is much more open. First, classrooms, labs, and libraries. Here, speech is governed by academic norms, with a professor or a librarian to provide guidance and a teacher to provide instruction about how it is that one uses an academic disciplinary language, whether that's the language of history, of physical science, of mathematics, of philosophy. In a classroom or a lab, speech is highly constrained. Students don't get to talk about whatever they want. They have to talk about the text or the topic that the professor has assigned, and to talk about it using a disciplinary language. They're not encouraged to say, as a conservative, I think, or as a progressive, I think, because being a conservative or a progressive is not part of being a historian, a biologist, or a mathematician. But as long as students and faculty too use academic norms, concepts, and theories, they have wide open freedom to ask questions, to advance lines of argument, and to disagree with the text, with the professor, with their peers, who all owe them rejoinders also offered in a disciplinary language. Second, clubs and registered student organization. One of the most important ways to support freedom of expression and to create an inclusive environment on college campuses is to support the associational freedoms of students to gather together in clubs. Nationally, these freedoms are under great stress. Now, 2 examples. In a liberal campus, the student government denied recognition to a pro-life club that had otherwise met all the requirements for being a club because they said that being pro-life was hateful to women. In a conservative part of the country, in another campus, administrators blocked the recognition of a club that was organized to advocate for single-payer health care because they said they didn't allow political clubs on campus, even though that was just obvious patent hypocrisy because they had other clubs with a clear political valence. Clubs create a sense of home and inclusion for students who are band together and celebrate their identity and experiences and advance causes and moral commitments that they share. And they're not obliged to be within their clubs, places for wide open expression. The pro-life club does not have to admit pro-life or pro-choice voices, and the club for advocating for single-payer healthcare is not required by hearing from all sides to have an event where people can advocate for marketplace healthcare. Third, dormitories. These are places where students have to be able to feel like they have a sense of home. And many schools have created norms for residences and dormitories to foster a sense of being able to be at home. So, for example, some schools have adopted policies that disallow the expression or the display of flags as potential visual irritants that can make some people feel not at home. And you might think this is about, we're not going to have displays of the Confederate flag, but those visual symbols are not always so obvious. So in 2022, I spoke with an administrator who talked about how targeted and unwelcome Russian students were being made to feel by the proliferation of displays of Ukrainian flags. Fourth, the quad, Numit Coffee, and other open spaces. Unlike these other 3 spaces where there are important limits, in these open spaces, I think there should be almost no limits apart from the First Amendment and policies against illegal harassment. We have to prepare students for citizenship and civic leadership and the public square, where the only limit is the First Amendment. We can't prepare students for these spaces and to be civic leaders if we have a simulacrum of public discourse where the most challenging speech is ruled out of bounds. Restrictions on what can be said are well-intentioned. The reality is that such restrictions, which are speech codes, are tools that can be used by the powerful to protect the status quo. One example. After racial events or racist events at the University of Michigan, the school adopted a speech code that was meant to disallow hate speech. What was the outcome? Before the policy was abandoned a year later, 20 students had been investigated under that. Every single one of them, a Black student, including a student who was investigated after a white student made a complaint about the phrase, poor white trash. The reality is speech codes will always be used by the powerful and the privileged to protect their own position. I'm going to use my last minute too. Even though we have to tolerate all speech, we don't have to live in an ethos where we have speech that is only on the level of the public square or in Twitter. Students, faculty, and staff create civil discourse ethos by having events like this, by deliberately teaching in classes and co-curriculars civil discourse skills, by encouraging clubs and registered student organizations and dormitories where students have a sense of home and a respite from the rough and tumble of campus debate, where those who are cordial are more esteemed than those who are mere provocateurs, where the habits of question posing and evidence offering spill over and overflow from classrooms to the rest of campus, and where we have forums just like this one, where we learn to model civil discourse. Thank you.
Okay, and last but certainly not least, we have Stacy Reamer, who is our interim vice president for student life and dean of students, and previously served and will continue to serve next year as our associate dean of students and director of the Center for Civic Engagement. Dr. Reamer received her PhD in higher education administration from Syracuse University and her undergraduate degree from St. John Fisher University. And we asked Dr. Reamer to provide an overview of the process by which Davidson College handles freedom of expression concerns and complaints about harassment and related possible violations of the Student Code of Responsibility, which you can all read about more in your deliberation guide that's online and on your tables in front of you. And also, we asked Dr. Reamer to speak about kind of general values that animate the college's approach to this process. So please welcome Dr. Reamer to the stage.
Thank you to the Planning Committee for having me here today to talk a little bit about our Code of Responsibility as it applies to the topic of freedom of expression. First, for folks who aren't familiar, I want to give you some context about our Code of Responsibility. First, as you read about for today, the Davidson College Constitution addresses student rights and responsibilities. Davidson College established a formal code of responsibility distinct from its honor code in 1968, and nothing in our current code is intended to infringe upon a student's rights to expression as outlined in the college constitution. The current code is grounded in best practices in our profession, including guidance from our professional associations like the Council for the Advancement of Standards, the Association of Student Conduct Administrators, and includes some best practices. I'm going to share them with you first. These best practices are grounded in institutional values and ethical principles. In your materials for today, you'll see a pledge that students adopt upon their arrival at Davidson in the student handbook. It's also on page 11 of the deliberation guide. You see those values represented. It states that Davidson College prides itself on trust, respect, and social responsibility of the community. And upon arrival, students adopt the pledge, and here are some of the values in it. Learners who value personal and intellectual honesty, maturity, social responsibility, and respect towards others, inclusive community, and no tolerance for harassment or discrimination, respect for health and well-being, and upholding policies that support our community standards, specifically referencing freedom of expression as set forth in the college constitution. A second principle of good practice is clear expectations. And so you'll see in our Code of Responsibility, underneath each value, we talk about the behaviors that might fall within that. You'll see also differentiated responses or pathways, right? These are a range of responses to Code of Responsibility issues, both for informal and formal responses. You'll see a reference to fairness. That is, ensuring that all students are treated fairly, regardless of their background and identity. And you'll see a reference to ongoing evaluation and conversation. Someone mentioned this earlier. I love that, right? People know more about the Code of Responsibility or the process they're a part of when they can have a conversation about it. I'll give you an example. The current Code of Responsibility represents an update from our 2022-23 code that was based on benchmarking from other institutions. It was based on student feedback. In 2023, as part of an effort to update and modernize the code, the student government distributed a survey to campus so that we could better understand how folks were interpreting it. Were parts of the Code of Responsibility clear? And then we have a student conduct council that provides updates and input into any evaluation processes that we have here on campus. And this is an appointed group of students, faculty, and staff members. These are some of the best practices in ways that they're enacted here for our code of responsibility. So with our procedures, we want to model the methods that match our values. Our code of procedures are meant, our code of responsibility procedures are meant to be educational and restorative in nature. So for example, a complaint, and these are the processes, by the way, a complaint can come into the Dean of Students office through a whole series of mechanisms, right? They might send us an email. They might drop a note under our door. They might stop by and meet with us. We receive a report of information. And then from there, complaints are reviewed. Information is collected from all parties in the complaint. That's aligned with best practices, conversations, education. And then aligned with best practices, we have a whole series of possible pathways. And you saw those in your guide for today. No action. There's no basis to move forward. Interim action. Non-disciplinary responses, conversations. Disciplinary responses. And I should note that if a disciplinary action is warranted, the path can be resolved in two ways, through a mutual resolution or a code of responsibility hearing with the Code of Responsibility Council. Or there can be a withdrawal of charges. Those are our processes, broadly speaking. So some key points in closing. I'm looking at my time. I'm doing good, Graham. Some key points in closing. The college's commitment to freedom of expression exists within parameters of our collective commitment to one another as an academic and residential community. All students sign and agree to abide by the Honor Code and the Code of Responsibility. The college does not initiate any disciplinary action against a student or student organization unless it has received a formal complaint from a named individual. That's usually a student or a group of students. We don't take action based on anonymous allegations. It can't be the case that the college is restricted from responding to a formal complaint signed by a student or group of students alleging harassment in violation of the Code of Responsibility on the basis that it might chill speech. To take that position would mean that the college could never investigate harassment allegations that are based on student expression. The college has an obligation to keep our students safe from harassment. One, under federal law, with respect to certain protected classes. I'm almost there. Two, under our Code of Responsibility as defined by the section prohibiting harassment. And three, to live up to the ideals of our statement of purpose to honor the dignity and worth of every person. Whether or not speech rises to the level of harassment is not always an easy question to answer. Before the college would ever take disciplinary action in a case where a student or student organization does not take responsibility for an action, a council of faculty and students, the Code of Responsibility Council, would have to deliberate on the facts and decide whether to draw that line, that fine line. In short, we'd provide due process. The college offers to meet multiple times with all parties in a process, and no one is required to participate in it. Thank you.
Okay, so can we give our whole lineup of speakers another rich round of applause? Thank you all for your remarks and your insights tonight. And now it is all of your turns to engage, to discuss, to deliberate about the questions, the topics, the issues that our panelists raise tonight.